Hello, Marlene and Greg, coming to you live today from Toronto, Canada. This is Nikki Shaver, the CEO of Legal Tech Hub. I wanted to share today with your audience something from the FT Innovative Lawyers Summit last week in London, a great event because it pulls together people from across legal verticals, including lawyers from law firms, GCs, technologists, people in innovation, and so on. One of the panels that really stuck with me was on positive psychology, which is a new type of psychology created in about the early 2000s. And a few takeaways from this panel. If you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. So there really is something to believing in agency and your own personal agency. Um, Another couple of things that I think are particularly important as we all look to driving adoption on the one hand and also increasing or maintaining engagement among your lawyer population and employees at this time of unprecedented change and uncertainty in the industry. Do not let people sit in their little pockets of pessimism. It will spread. Instead, as a leader, what one really should be focused on is creating a sense of hope and agency and pathway. So a sense of hope, first of all, but then also a vision for the way forward. So what is the path forward? And then providing your people with a sense that they actually have agency themselves to drive that path forwards. And I love that. I think that's a really good thing for leaders to remember at this time, and also something for all of us to remember as we are encouraging people to change the way they work and to adopt new technologies and new tools and new ways of working. They're much less likely to do so if they don't feel that they have agency themselves to do so. So leaving you with that today, we will be writing about the FT Innovative Lawyers Summit. So do look us up on legaltechnologyhub.com and you'll get a notification of that article coming out. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Geek in Review, the podcast focused on innovative and creative ideas in the legal industry. I'm Marlene Gaybauer.
And I'm Greg Lambert. And today we are exploring how law firms can harness their own internal data to power the next generation of legal artificial intelligence. And to do that, I am very happy to welcome Stephen Costigan, the founder of Atlas AI. And Atlas AI is an enterprise-grade legal AI platform that helps professional services teams transform their internal knowledge into a powerful private legal knowledge graph. So, Stephen, welcome to the Geek and Reviews. Good to have you.
Thanks, Greg. Great to be here.
Stephen, can you start by giving our listeners an overview of Atlas AI and what led you to build a platform focused specifically on firm-hosted private legal AI?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll start off by just saying our platform turns a firm's documents and matter history into a private, curated knowledge graph that the firm owns and runs inside of its own environment. It then puts research, drafting, and review, as well as enterprise search on top of that graph. And really what led me to do this is I've spent years building software inside of demanding enterprises, um, including elite law firms. So most of my experience is in the AmLaw 50 space. And I kept seeing the same trap. Every AI tool asked a firm to choose between productivity and control. Either get speed by shipping your most sensitive work to someone else's cloud, or you get control by building something that you could barely operate. So for I guess for a profession whose entire value rests on confidentiality and privilege, that's not a real choice.
Yeah, and do you, just a side question on that? Do you think the foundational companies, the Geminis, the Claudes, the Chat GPTs, do you think they really understand the legal market and how sensitive the data is that we have?
Well, I think a firm should be able to use frontier AI without its knowledge ever leaving its walls. And the firm's knowledge should become an asset that it owns, not fuel for an outside vendor's model.
Yeah. So, well, Stephen, when you and I were prepping for this, and we had a couple of conversations, you really got me thinking, and I've been thinking about this for a while. But it was good to talk with somebody who's actually doing it about the underlying architecture of the knowledge graph systems like
Right.
you've developed there at Atlas AI. So for the non-engineering types that are listening to this, can you explain what it is that a legal knowledge graph is, why it's a better foundation than just taking, dumping your documents into a vector database and maybe just creating a basic RAG system? What benefit do you get from the knowledge graph?
Sure. I guess I'll start off with an analogy. So, a standard vector database is like a clerk who hands you the pages that kind of sound the most similar to your question that you've asked. Um, it's fast, but it has no understanding, it has very little context. And it does not know that the company in one agreement, Acme Holdings, in another agreement are the same client. So it only knows which pages use similar words. And a knowledge graph is the opposite. It's a map of your knowledge where the things that matter, clients, matters, parties, clauses, obligations, are represented as connected entities. The graph knows that, client A has these matters, each matter has these documents, and each document contains these clauses and parties. And it captures the relationships, not just the text that it's, referring to.
Yeah, yeah.
And, really AI
I'd
is
written.
only
I was going to say I wrote an entire like section of a book on on this late last year, and it was interesting because like with the legal industry, we all started off with those vector databases, and we were like, "Oh, this is great because it knows kind of similar uh, words that we can look for." It was kind of like that natural language search that we were promised in the early
right.
2000s and never really worked out. But it'd be great if law was flat, if our business was flat and every document was equal to every other document or every client was equal to every other client. But it's a pretty complicated, batch of information that we deal with. And I think even like the legal research vendors have finally figured out that it's not just flat information, that there's nuance, that there's levels to it. So I geek out a little bit when we start talking about adding knowledge graphs to the data. But it's interesting that you're doing that with internal information. So that
Right.
is something most people don't think about.
Right. And, AI is only as reliable as what you grounded it in. So, even with traditional search, adding vector search, adding knowledge graph, bringing all these together into a hybrid search pipeline, you're still not going to achieve the level of accuracy that law requires. And
Mhm.
that is why we've kind of added an additional layer, which is focusing on bringing the ontology into the index. So bringing firm ontology into the index, their information architecture, if you will, in a traditional way to describe it. And then using agents to map that data. So at a high level, that's kind of what we're doing. And that's why we're seeing such big increases in accuracy when drafting and, performing enterprise search.
So speaking of accuracy, these tools tend to work better when they have clean data. So how much work does, a firm need to put into cleaning and curating, their precedents, their templates, contracts, before um, you know, Atlas AI can actually generate reliable insights?
So I would
Can you give
expand
us
it
the internet
past
out?
Atlas AI, and I would just say this
Yeah.
that um, far less than people fear. And this is the part that a lot of the firms get wrong about AI projects. They really assume a year-long data cleaning program before any value is derived. And that's not, really the case anymore. So, agent-led curation, as we like to frame it, is really, speeding up the curation process. Curation can now be automated and continuous. And in our platform, a component we call the librarian runs over every document as it comes in and extracts the entities and relationships. It resolves duplicates, reconciles, the same party appearing in different forms, and maps everything to the firm's ontology. So this is a controlled vocabulary for legal concepts, and the graph cleans itself as it grows. You pointed at I manage SharePoint, and it builds the structure automatically. What the firm does contribute is judgment, not janitorial work, right? And that's what we're removing from the equation.
Yeah,
Just
because
go ahead. Sorry.
oh, yeah, because I mean, you would still have to determine, like, even if you have the infrastructure in place, like, you still have to determine, okay, which of these documents are important
Exactly.
versus other ones.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yes, and that's now possible through automation. I'd say defining and improving the ontology for practice areas and a light human in the loop review queue where the system can flag lower confidence data extractions before they're committed to the graph, um, really allows the firm to govern that quality.
Hmm.
And it does not need to hand clean precedents anymore. So I'm not getting into a ton of detail about our product, but at a high level, that's what you're able to achieve now, um, and it's pretty incredible.
And, and this will deploy directly into the firm infrastructure. So, like, the Azure environment.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of key, I think, for large law firms, right? Because of the security question. But how are you
Right.
seeing how are you seeing that it's changing conversation around client data security and firm governance in these firms?
It's changing confidentiality from a promise into an architecture. It's the best way I
All
can
right.
describe it.
Dive deeper
Um,
into that.
Yeah.
sure.
Sounds
You know,
good.
so
Tell me
so it,
more.
so in a standard SaaS platform, you're really trusting a vendor's contract. You're, signing something that basically says, trust us with this privileged client data. We adhere to all these controls. We have enough funding. Trust us. We can
Mm.
handle this. Or there won't be a data breach. Um, and we have the indemnity, clauses to kind of back it up if something happens. Perfect. That doesn't change anything. Client data is exposed. Um, so trust us that we'll handle it correctly. Trust that it does not train a model. And for a firm with duties to its clients, trust is a weak control.
Mm.
And it's been our thesis since the beginning. We started off as just a, plain private version of Chat GPT, right? With
Mm.
a few legal twists in our prompt library. And now we've expanded to cover a ton of different focus areas and features with the platform. But mainly with Atlas AI, the platform runs inside the firm's own Azure environment under the firm's keys, and the data, the graph, the embeddings, the audit trail, none of it leaves the firm's environments at all. And the models are accessed under zero data retention terms, so nothing is retained and nothing trains a third party's system. And I think, that flips the governance conversation entirely. Instead of can we get comfortable with the vendor's data handling, procedures, it becomes can we show our general counsel and our conflicts partner exactly where the data flows? And the answer is yes, because it never leaves. And that is why firms will run their most sensitive matters on our platform, and on private AI infrastructure in the future, because the sovereignty is total in that configuration.
Very interesting. So, uh, I have a saying that I use probably a little too much now, and that is that lawyers tend to do better with a red pen than a blue pen. They like to have something to edit rather than create whole cloth, and they do their best work where they have a solid first draft to edit and refine. So how do the agentic workflows in Atlas AI provide attorneys with that critical kind of first draft for complex tasks like due diligence or bulk contract review? What's some of the benefits that they get so that they can kind of dive in much faster?
Right. I love that framing. Just like high level, we give the lawyer a first draft that has already been argued against by a second adversarial system. And they get to do their best work, the red pen work, instead of assembly. And I can dive further into that, obviously,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
if
please
you'd
do.
like. So, like, would you
Yep.
like me
Yeah,
to go
go
Please
into
ahead.
more
do.
detail? Okay. So what I mean by that is the system is not there to replace a lawyer's judgment. It is there to deliver a strong, cited first draft. So the lawyer spends their time editing and deciding, not assembling. And, um, for due diligence, an attorney points the system at a deals document set, and it produces a diligence checklist or an issues list where every line item carries an inline citation to the exact subsection that it came from. Not section 3, but, section 3.2a.
Mhm.
For bulk contract review, you define the question once, change of control, governing law, termination, and the system extracts structured answers across hundreds of documents into a reviewable grid, and each cell is traceable to the source. And the part that makes the draft trustworthy is an adversarial verification step. One model drafts, and a separate model is tasked with arguing against it, checking that the deliverable does what was asked and that every citation is precise. And that happens before the lawyer ever sees it or anyone else ever sees it. So that red pen the attorney picks up is editing a verified draft, not catching the machine's mistakes or having someone else catch it. Even worse.
So, I mean, there's always sort of a question of build versus buy, and seems to be that seems to be continuing in the market. Now, you know, what do you think the primary differentiator is for firms like they saying, okay, we're going to choose to build our own capabilities. We're going to build our own knowledge model. Relying on our own data rather than relying on a centralized vendor model.
I mean, my thoughts are, number one, you're not going to build a differentiated practice area in your firm or maintain differentiation by buying the same product and using the same data set as everyone else. That's number one. Number two, data is the greatest asset of that the firm has. The signals that come off that data are being extracted. And why are you giving your data away or, training another organization's environment, on kind of certain signals? Let's just put it that way. But the primary differentiator is not a feature. It is ownership. And
So,
with sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just really kind of backing up the points that I made is the centralized vendor model. In that model, you're renting access to their product and their interface, their roadmap, and their data handling promises. Um, and really, your knowledge ultimately improves their system. And with our platform, or with private AI infrastructure in general, you build a curated graph that you own outright. And that compounds with every matter that you work on and bring into this platform, or into your own platform. And you can extend and build on that. And you can build differentiated products that differentiate your firm in the market. You can do that now very easily, especially with all the recent advancements in agentic AI. So
Mhm.
three things follow from that. First is the ontology is yours and editable. So you govern how your knowledge is structured, not some vendor. Second, because it is structured and resolved, the asset gets more valuable over time rather than being consumed and forgotten after each query, in like a RAG model. And then, third, because it runs in your environment, you're never exposing client data to build someone else's moat. The crowded part of the market is selling chatbots and tooling that sit on top of a model over the same closed pattern. The durable position is helping a firm own its intelligence, its knowledge infrastructure, and the model layer is becoming a commodity. The curated graph is part of that. It's defensible and it should belong to the firm.
What would you
Is
say?
there a certain type of expertise that firms need in order to kind of maintain this? Because I see, if we're going to use a third party to, kind of give our data to, and then rely upon their infrastructure, is there a different type of expertise that we need internally in order to kind of maintain our own version of that infrastructure that would be different? Hopefully that question made sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it does, but it definitely makes sense. And in terms of requiring like an entire team to manage an infrastructure like that, I think so in the future, the near future, um, it won't be quite as much of an ask to build and part of your organization that can manage private AI infrastructure. And I think existing knowledge management roles can be adapted to curation and management of that aspect of the environment. And I say that because of all the advancements in agent-based infrastructure management. For instance, in our environment, we have what we call the enclave, and this is an agent environment where pretty much everything in our infrastructure is managed automatically. Um, and obviously in a highly governed way, but it's really not that difficult to roll your own infrastructure uh, management agents. And I'd say, like, when we look at the amount of code that's written um, agentically in our organization, we've gone from like 10% to 65% of our platform is written agentically. And so I'd say everyone thinks they're going to need this huge team to manage their own private infrastructure, but that's simply not the case anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know a lot of us are looking at the Kirkland advertisements for GPU professionals, and and seeing, that type of kind of build it almost from scratch, on your own. With Atlas AI, I'm not going to have to hire a bunch of stand up GPUs and monitor those, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I had a question because you were mentioning before that the legal AI market is incredibly saturated, which it is. We all know that. But I don't know so much from like a knowledge management perspective. I mean, there seems to be a more limited set of tools that sort of deal specifically with that. And I'm curious, what do you think kind of the differentiators between those types of tools are?
Well, I don't think there are many knowledge management platforms out there
Correct.
at all, to start with, that are highly effective for law
Correct.
firms. Again, the team size is typically 1 to, 5 in that particular area of the firm. So, if they're lucky. So I don't think there are really any solutions out there to compare to, honestly.
Hmm.
But
So
I
I mean,
think what's critical is, to automate the curation of the DMS. And like if you can do that, you've achieved a lot for a firm just to
yeah,
start.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. There seems to be limited types of tools that say that they do that. The
Yes.
ones that are out there still say, you still need to offer it something to start with or to clean up the data. So I was just curious if there's, any other differentiators you would see between, tools in that space.
Well, the thing is, it's not just about curating the data; it's what happens after that too.
Hmm.
Uh, and so there's many paths one can go down as a founder building a product. And the path that we've selected is to get away from building features to compete with everyone else on the end user side of the product, and to enable kind of democratization of feature development. And so you can take, a Claude Code, for instance, and utilize our MCP, access your curated data set, and build whatever applications you want, um, either separate from our platform or integrated into our platform. And that is something that I think is truly unique. It takes firms away from having to follow the vendor roadmap and allows them to start building differentiated products for their firm immediately.
So, Steve, before we get to our crystal ball question, we've been asking our guests to share with us some of the ways that they're keeping up with the market. So it's just so much to try and just keep up with. So, do you have any resources that you go to that you don't mind sharing with us that kind of helps you stay up with all the transitions in technology and whatnot?
We really love the Legal Tech Hub for market signals and artificial lawyer.
Yeah.
I'd say from a knowledge graph and data architecture standpoint, the foundational knowledge graphs work by Hogan and colleagues is great. That's really kind of, the high level. Applied AI, Ethan Malik, for how professionals actually
Mhm.
adopt these tools. Um, so
Yeah.
those are my recommendations.
I I have a artificial lawyer story to tell on this because I was
Oh,
on Richard's podcast a few weeks ago, and I was in my Austin office, and one of the attorneys came up and was like, "Oh, I heard your podcast interview," and I was like, "Oh, which one?" Is like, "Well, the one you were on with with Richard," and I was like, "Well, have you listened to my podcast?" And they're like,
exactly.
"Oh no, I haven't listened to that yet." So Richard does a pretty good
Funny.
job. He
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. And I try to read across two lanes that I don't know if they talk all the time, but I think that's changing. And I think we want to
Mm,
drive that change. That's what we're after, is the legal innovation world and the knowledge representation world. The interesting work is kind of at the seam between them.
mm.
That's something that really no one's attacking right now. So it's something that really excites me.
Yeah, I think that is spot on. It is time for a crystal ball question. And so,
I have
looking
no idea
ahead,
what
then
that is. So I'm scared.
don't be scared. It's okay. It's like we only
We're
come
all just
we'll
guessing.
only come back next year and make sure and see if you were right or not. So
Right.
looking ahead, the next few years, as AI platforms become, deeply integrated with internal firm knowledge and semantic search, what's the single biggest shift that you see coming for the traditional law firm business model?
Ownership. So the biggest shift is that a firm's accumulated knowledge stops being a byproduct and becomes its most leveraged asset. And that really breaks the math um, for the billable hour rests on. So the traditional model monetizes leverage. Partners sell associate hours against precedent that lives in people's heads, really, and scattered files today. That's changing, obviously. But when that precedent becomes a curated graph, the routine production work compresses dramatically, and the firms that own that graph will deliver senior judgment with far less junior leverage. They'll be able to, productize their expertise essentially. I think fixed fee, on demand, client facing in ways that the hourly model really never allowed. So the divergence I see is ownership
It's like
and
ownership and usability.
usability, and really the firms that treat AI as a tool they rent will really compete on price against everyone renting the same tools. And firms that build and own their own knowledge graphs and curate their data into that graph and use it effectively, they turn their expertise into a durable compounding asset. And that becomes the real moat for the firm, not the headcount, really. And the
Wow.
losers are going to be those who gave their knowledge away and don't really have much to show for it. So there's my crystal ball
Okay,
response.
kids, you heard it. You heard it here. Don't give your knowledge away.
It's surprising that you have to tell people that, isn't it?
I think
Well, Stephen Costigan. Oh, good.
really, just to land this real quick is in 5 years, the question will not be which AI tool your firm uses. It'll be whether your firm owns its knowledge or rents access to it from a bunch of knowledge providers. And that is the line the next generation of firms will be drawn on.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid
Yeah, me too.
prediction there.
Mhm.
No. Well, Stephen Costigan from Atlas AI, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us and break down and geek out with us on the knowledge
Thank
graphs
you.
and private AI. I really
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks,
so much for
Stephen.
having me.
And thanks to all of you for listening to the Geek in Review. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a colleague. We'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn and Substack.
And Stephen, where's the best place for listeners to learn more about you and what you're doing there at Atlas AI?
Sure. So you can find me on my LinkedIn, just Stephen Costigan, Stephen with a PH. And I'm happy to talk with any firm thinking about owning their AI rather than renting it. The site is atlasai.io.
And as always, the music you hear is from Jerry David DeSica. Thank you, Jerry, and goodbye, everybody.